Wow, you're in a really special place. Elvia Thompson is our first speaker, and she's going to be telling us about Peg Watts, who's no longer here, but whose spirit imbues this place. Elvia is the president of Stellar Productions, Inc., a web and print design and public relations consulting business here in Annapolis. Her international clients include businesses and nonprofits in various fields, including law, community associations, business association, health, politics, and environmental stewardship. She has a master's degree from Florida International University and a BA from the University of Miami, my own honor, by the way. She serves on the board of the Annapolis Maritime Museum and the Spa Creek Conservancy, and is webmaster and principal graphic artist for both. In 2007, Elvia founded Annapolis Green to consolidate local environmental connections and help people live environmentally responsible lives in this area. Annapolis Green, now a successful grassroots interest group that helps individuals and businesses make environmental connections, is the umbrella for the organization called Green Drinks. Annapolis, a fun part of the environmental movement. And not every Thursday, every month, we gather and celebrate the environment with green drinks. Ms. Thompson is an avid sailor who has a passionate interest in the health of the Chesapeake Bay, and she's going to share her thoughts about the doyen of Eastport history, Peg Watts.
I know a lot of you are not from right around here, but let me tell you what happened on March 20th, a week ago. We burned our socks. And it's a tradition that started here in Eastport. You burn your socks to hail the beginning of spring. So theoretically, if you burn your socks, you don't need them anymore. It's going to be warm and spring is going to come. Well, you know, I've got socks on today. But nonetheless, that event happened right here on our beach on the first anniversary of the death of Peg Watts. And she would have loved it. She would have been the first one to say, great, that's a great way to celebrate my life and mark my passing with that. She was the #1 person for fun. There's a little saying that this quote, I don't know whose quote it is, it says, well-behaved women rarely make history. Well, that would be Peg.
I have it.
Yeah. Well, she not only had the t-shirt, she lived it. She was, I met Peg when she was in her 70s. I didn't know her in her youth, unfortunately. But she had more energy, more life than I ever had. She was just an amazing person. And as Jeff said, was the heart and soul of this entire organization and campus that we have here. She had the vision to realize that if you can get kids excited about where they came from, or at least even just tell them where they came from, that good things will come from there, and the community will be better off for it. It's been very interesting when we have kids come through here, and they often come even with the school program, they come with parent chaperones, at least a few parents. There have been so many parents who have said, I've actually heard them say, you know, my granddaddy was a waterman and I never really knew what he did. Now, isn't that sad? And I want you to know, I'm wearing the Peg Wallace outfit. Peg Wallace must have had 20 white starched shirts. Mine's not starched, she wouldn't like this. And she would always show up dressed pretty much like this, in jeans or a nice pair of pants and a starched white shirt and beautiful big chunky jewelry. This is until she was like 80-something. You see some kids sailing in Spa Creek in the afternoon in tiny little boats that look like little baby boats. You'd see that about half of those kids are girls. It isn't just little boys out there. And these are little girls who don't have a clue that maybe even a generation ago it would have been a little unusual for girls to be out there sailing, particularly sailing against boys. And in many ways, sailing, particularly competitive sailing, it really still is a male-dominated sport, but that's changing a lot. You may remember that there have even been Volvo ocean race boats skippered completely by women. So women now have a fighting chance in the sport worldwide and a very strong presence in Annapolis. Both business of sailing is a really big deal here in Annapolis. we are a drinking town with a sailing truck. And spring drinks. But I'll close with one last story. The day after the hurricane, the water literally was about up to here in this building.
Wow.
The debris out here and the wind wasn't that much, but there was so much debris in the water, it poked holes in the building. I mean, there were holes in the building that you could have driven a car through here. And many of us thought that the building was going to have to come down. And what a tragedy. So we met the next day at the home of our chairman of the board, and everybody was just absolutely down in the dumps. What do we do? What do we do? We sit down, and Peg was the first one to speak, and she said, you know, this is probably the best thing that could have ever happened to us. And she said, now we can rebuild. The community is going to be completely behind us, which they were. And she absolutely changed the feeling, the spirit of that meeting, and gave us kind of the impetus to go forward, raise the money, and look at this beautiful facility that's like no other. And magic things happen here. Children come here, wonderful music is made here, people learn from the seminars that are given, they learn from one another. And every time I come here, I think about Peg, because I think she's out here in the ether someplace, just smiling, looking down at this and inspiring people. So I feel very honored to have known her. And on that note, I'm going to introduce our next speaker. I'd like to introduce one of the women who is at the very top of the sailing business in Annapolis, and that's Molly Winans. And she is the editor of the Chesapeake Bay's primary, homegrown, and fabulous sailing magazine, Spin Sheet. And she's going to talk about how other women, besides herself, have influenced the business of sailing, and how that business and the fact that there are women at the top influences other women, other young girls coming into the business, not only the fun, but the business of sailing. Thanks.
Well, thank you all for being here, Mayor Moyer. Thank you for coming. And also, more importantly, than Mayor Moyer, Mom's best friends are here. Sandy and Jane and the ladies from the New Annapolitans. Thank you. You guys have changed my mom's life. I appreciate you being here. Woo, got a little choked up there. And I got choked up hearing about Peg Wallace and thinking about this space. Right across the way, you'll see Annapolis Sailing School. When I first came to Annapolis, I taught there for many years on weekends. I taught sailing. And it's through that I met Jeff Holland. He was an alum at that point of Annapolis Sailing School, but he was working in the boat shows at the time. And I was a struggling writer, and I was trying to get my stuff into magazines, and people said, you know, kid, we need some tips or something. And I think at the time I had like a couple bad poems and maybe some papers I wrote in college. I didn't have clips, and I needed to start. And somebody said, go talk to Jeff Holland, he knows everybody. So I did. I went over to Jeff's office, and he doesn't even remember this. He worked for the boat show at the time doing PR. And I went into his office, and he said, oh, pulls out his Rolodex. We're dating ourselves there. He pulled out a real Rolodex and photocopied a bunch of names and numbers for me and said, you can call all these people and drop my name, tell them I sent you, and see if you can write an article for them. And out of that, I got a couple of articles that I wrote for Inside Annapolis magazine. And that's really how I got my start writing for magazines. And obviously I was hooked into the sailing community. That's also where I met Dave Gandel, who was the co-founding editor of Spin Sheet. And that's where I am now. I brought copies of Spin Sheet for all of you if you'd like to take one with you. They're right over here, but I want to just show you something in the magazine. And that is a picture of the socks that I learned last week. I bought them in New York City, and my coworker was like, you're going to get letters about those. Those are the ugliest socks I've ever seen. And I thought they were kind of cute, but there was a big hole in the heel. And you know, no matter how much progress I think women have made in the sport of sailing and elsewhere, does anyone else really have a tough time figuring out what to wear at this time of year? Right. Oh my gosh, I always come out looking somewhere between I'm going to a funeral and an Easter basket. I don't know. Anyway, I want to talk a bit about women in sailing and women in the business of sailing. Spin Sheet magazine is a grassroots publication, meaning it really did grow roots here in Annapolis with a couple of people, Mary Ewenson and Dave Gandel, 50-50 business partners. They started it in Mary's spare bedroom in a little apartment, and it turned into a thing, and that was 14 years ago. Quite recently, in fact, 1 year ago, Dave Gandel moved on a new endeavor and sold his portion of the business to Mary. And it's funny because a lot of people in the community thought that Mary, or thought that Dave was the boss, because he was very much the public face. He's a very wonderful, he's a very talented public speaker. And Mary was happy to let him be the public speaker because that's not her favorite thing. And, but everyone in the house always knew that this was a 50-50 partnership. This was not a male-dominated business. It was 50-50. In-house it was 50-50. The writers have always been 50-50. But since Dave left, there was a strange transition period where everybody was like, oh, are you guys scared? And without Dave there, I was like, well, no, one of the founding partners is still in the business, and she's, well, in a lot of ways, always kind of worn the pants. She's always signed the checks. As long as she's still around, we think we'll be fine. And we found that in the first year after he departed, we were fine. We were not only fine, but in October, we had our biggest year, we had our biggest month ever. So we're thriving over at Spin Sheet. But there's a stereotype out there that sailing is a male-dominated sport, and I always say about stereotypes, where there's smoke, there's fire. And it is in many ways a male-dominated sport. It always has been, especially if you look at big boat racing, you struggle to find the women in it. But we choose not to dwell on that. We choose to keep moving forward as if that is changing now every day, because it is. In some ways it changes in small increments, but that's okay. Change is still change. And like Peg said about those little kids you see sailing under the Eastport Bridge, those little girls have no idea there's any sort of stereotype, and I'm not going to fill it. Well, let's just let them keep moving forward, and I think it's terrific. Right now, Spin Sheet is actually kind of women-dominated. It's gotten to the point now where we're trying to hire some male writers because we have so many women in the magazine. But people don't really seem to notice. We have one guy who's noticed, but I'll get to him. We also have noticed that so many friends in the program, so many other women in the business of sailing, we have so many friends who are successful and accomplished sailors and professional sailors, it's really hard to dwell on women having any sort of a disadvantage. So we just try to think of always opening doors. How can we promote more events with women in them? How can we offer women ways to get into sailing where they might be a little bit closed off? And that's where we focus on it without putting a spotlight on it all of the time. I get lots of offers from writers. I want to write an article about how there aren't that many women in sailing. I'm like, well, I'm not really interested in that. What else do you have to think? Because if you have an article about opportunities that will bring more women in, we'll bring it on. But I don't want the first half of the article. I don't want the negative part. I want all positive part, and I want action steps on how to bring more women into sailing. Recently, someone sent me a very long, mighty article, and he wanted to really focus on the negative. It wasn't just about women. It was about minorities that were not into sailing. And he kind of covered across the board. And I said, you know what? If you have an article with action items on how to bring more minorities into sailing, how to bring more people with certain physical handicaps or mental challenges into sailing, more women, more girls, more people who are disadvantaged financially, well, that's the kind of article I want to hear about. And also, if any of you want to write them, I'm open to see that too. The discrepancy I see is mostly in big boat sailing. It's expensive. It's expensive. And that will change as women make more money, but there's also the problem that, women tend to have babies at some point and sometimes jump out of the world of sailing for a decade or so, and a lot of their husbands can still stay in it. And I don't know what to do to change that. That's a bigger dynamic than what I have under my control. But let's talk about the good news. This is what I want to bring up some points. I had a long conversation yesterday with Amy Gross-Kehoe, who's an employee of Spin Sheet. She's also a professional sailing coach. She's been coaching sailing for 15 years. So she knows what the trends have been in the past 15 years with girls in sailing. The first thing she said was, I'm so jealous of girls in sailing right now. I'm so jealous of the opportunities. They have twice as many opportunities as boys these days. She said 10, 11, and 12-year-old girls are better sailors than boys. they can not only compete with boys, but they can beat them because they're more coordinated. She said there's something about boys' arms, they're growing too fast or something, they don't know how long their arms can reach, and girls, she said, they pick it up very quickly. She says she prefers teaching girls because they can sit and focus. Well, that changes, not so much. These days they have things such as the Girls Opti Nationals. The girls can compete on a national level. It's starting at the age of 8 years old. At the age of 13-year-old, they can compete into the youth championships for girls, as well as being competitive in events with boys. They have other championships. In college age, they have junior women single and double-handed racing events. They also have match racing and team racing events. There's something that they call it Chicks on Boats, C-H-I-X, Chicks on Boats, where they're getting women into team racing, and it's really growing into a big thing. So these are some wonderful opportunities, and one of the really good things about them is that women who get involved in team racing and match racing might be able to stay into adulthood because they don't necessarily have to buy boats. In match racing circuit, a lot of times they can have a regatta somewhere where they can borrow boats, and people say, hey, there's a women match racing event, I will donate my boat for the day. So that might be one way to bring more girls into the competitive side of the sport. There are some wonderful role models out there for girls right now. I don't know anyone follow the Olympics, the sailing aspect of the Olympics? Anna Tunnicliffe, who is a graduate of Old Dominion University, so she sailed on the Chesapeake Bay. Even though she's from Florida, we like to claim her as our own because she sailed in college on the Chesapeake Bay. She won the Olympic gold medal in the laser radial. She also tops the world rankings in laser radial sailing, and this year she won Rolex Yachtswoman of the Year. She's a buff. She's a runner, she's incredibly fit, she's cute as a button, and she's a kick-butt sailor. And she's a great role model for girls these days. And she's out in the community talking to girls and letting them know that you can do this, this is something you can do. We think that this positive stuff is going to filter into our industry. We think that it already has, and we feel it. The younger women that we hire at Spin Sheet, they don't seem to have any concept that there is any sort of a disconnect or any sort of a discrepancy between men and women. If you happen to bring up a point to them such as, okay, 70 cents to the dollar, they always kind of look at you like, well, make you forget. I tend to think, let them keep thinking that, let them keep working that way, and then maybe one day they'll get mad and things will change by bits and pieces, I think. For those sailing couples where the women might drop out of sailing for a while to raise their little kids, well, you know what? Some men drop out of sailing to help raise the kids too. And there are ways for them to re-enter as a family. If you see the J105s out here, it's a very popular racing boat, arguably one of the most popular racing boats on the bay. That boat was designed as a family racer. Okay, that was designed as a family racer, so it's designed for men, women, and kids to race. And it's increasing in popularity, and entire families are coming back into sailing. That's good for boys and girls. And let's see, since I have to wrap it up, is there anything else I wanted to say? Oh, I wanted to mention the guy who said that Spin Sheet now has become too feminine and soft, too soft and feminine. I thought, and I wrote back to him and said, well, you're the first negative letter I've received all year. I had just gotten a letter from Terry Hutchinson, who's an Annapolis sailor, who is also a Rolex Yachtsman of the Year, who said, Spin Sheet gets better every month. You're doing brilliant work. Keep it up. When it comes to women in sailing, Suzanne Colville is the expert really in this now. You started in 1984, is that when your business started? Suzanne has a sailing school called Womanship. And the motto of Womanship is nobody yells and everybody learns. So she teaches seamanship, she teaches safety, and she really gives women a wonderful opportunity to participate in this sport and actually enjoy it and keep them in it. So what she does for the sailing community and for the Annapolis community is amazing. She also happens to be involved in the Spot Creek Conservancy. So if you want to know something about rain barrels, well, don't get her started. So Suzanne Colville is excellent.
I've been involved in environmental issues, I guess, will show you how old I am, at least since 1978.
when I moved to St. Louis with my former husband, who was an academician, so we moved around like Army people. And somebody called and said, would you like to join the League of Women Voters of St. Louis County? And I said, gosh, I'm in graduate school and I've got a daughter in kindergarten. The thing about women, and I brought this, that does make us all wonder, is that the environment in which we learn is terribly critical to us. Molly said, you know, our motto is nobody else. Now, I didn't think that up. I didn't have the sense to think that up. But on the very first course we ever taught, which was in the Virgin Islands in January 1985, there were 6 women from all over the country who never gotten together. And we went down to the Virgin Islands and we chartered a boat and we hired a U.S. Coast Guard licensed captain, a female. And I hired a female not because I thought women should be taught by women, but I thought, we want a natural, comfortable environment. I don't want to have anybody worrying about how her hair looks, or putting on makeup, or what she's wearing while she's learning to sail. I want it to be comfortable. I learned that women being models, I mean, I've learned more in 25 years than anybody else has learned in 25 years, that women being a model for each other is such a great way to learn. But also, basically, to me, it wasn't just teaching the skills, but it was concentrating on the diversity of the experience, knowledge, and skill, and learning paces and styles of every student who came aboard. If that isn't an exciting environment in which to learn. So one woman wrote afterwards, I had such a great time, I learned so much, and nobody else. And therefore, the environment should be, women really want an environment in which they can take a big breath, be themselves, trust the way they learn, trust the way they think, and move ahead. So one of the obstacles that we always face, because a womanship course is a transforming experience. Lots of times we cannot explain it, either those who teach it or those who learn from it. But really, it's finding out, I can do this, this is what I love to do, I can measure for myself what I know and what I don't know. I can establish my own learning agenda. I can play skipper and crew to everybody else on the boat. And I'm also meeting people, you know, who come from all over the world, who come from every walk of life. And one of my favorite stories is the colonel and the waitress on a boat in the Virgin Islands. And the instructors are always reporting these stories. I mean, initially reporting them much more than they do now because they're a lot more accustomed to the fun and the diversity. But she said, it was such fun watching them. One of them would say to the other, come on, babe, let's just do it. And they would never have met before. And I'm going to touch on a touchy subject. We are not a lesbian group. We are not a gay group. But it was always important to me that we represent and bring on board every kind of woman. And I can only tell you that the very first time we had a gay couple, we worked so hard with the gay couple to make sure that each of them was going to learn for herself as well as together. We went at 11.5 knots. Now you may not think that's fast, but on a sailboat, that's very fast. For those of you who don't know anything about sailing, and I guess how many people know nothing about sailing? So I hope I'm trying not to use words that intimidate. When you come on board our boat, you don't need to know a glossary of terms. You're going to learn through practical application, using it so that it makes sense to you. But becoming that sailor is going to be your personal process. So taking the new you home, a woman wrote back, I have to tell you the story. She called and she said, I got home, my husband gave me a purse, my son gave me flowers, and I said, thank you, thank you, thank you. But let's go back, let's go down and see how our boat kicks. And she had learned that she could tell how you dock a boat and which way you want to dock a boat by how the rudder moves when you back your boat up. And she wanted to see how that worked in where their dock was and where their slip was to make their course go. Quickly, I'll just say, what are the results? a lot more happy sailing families, a lot more women attending things like the Sapient Sea seminars that are going to be Saturday and Sunday this week that, we're participating in. Asking questions, actively being part, running their own boats, owning their own boats, becoming teachers. 25% of our instructors today who are womanship trained and licensed by the U.S. Coast Guard are former students.
And just about every woman who sails in Annapolis has been one of Suzanne's instructors at one point or another.
Yes.
One quick story, you may not remember this. In 1986, we had a National Gender Equity and Education Conference in Washington, D.C., and we always have a post-conference trip. So we came to Annapolis from Washington and went out from the
I
day
remember.
with womanship, and everyone loved it, including the woman from a small desert community in Utah, who was just
Utah student.
But this was people, educators across the country who work on issues impacting on girls and young women, and it was a wonderful experience.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
From 1986.
I didn't bring any brochures because I didn't know whether that would be considered appropriate. I do have a card, lots of cards if anybody wants one. And I'm sorry that there isn't more. Yes.
Could you just say a couple of words about the program you're thinking about for young women?
Oh, okay. Young Womanship is for 7th to 12th graders. And this is something that any school class can work towards. We work with several schools now on tall ships and skipjacks over in Cambridge with classes of students who raise the money during the year to come to Womanship and learn to sail, learn navigation, also learn ecology, because as I mentioned before, green is critical. I can't think of better partners than sailing and cleaning up the environment. And you can call me about that. I'd love to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Well, we have a whole ocean of equally wonderful women. Thank you all three for your talks and for sharing about Peg Wallace for the students. Whose tummies are rumbling a little bit? Anybody? I see Trish nodding her head. Great, for president. They're waiting for us at the Treaty of Paris restaurant. So if you will board the trolleys, we can...
Mike's not working.